Welcome, Dr. John Demartini, to the Me&my Health Up podcast show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
I feel so honoured, and I'm sure the listeners are very honoured to have you on the show. Remarkable story and background, and how you have come to doing what you're doing today. And I'm just thinking there might be a minute minority of people listening that may not have come across your great work that you're doing around the world. So I was just wondering if you could share a bit about your backstory, just to bring them into the picture of how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
The brief version. I had a number of challenges when I was a child, definitely learning challenges, speaking challenges, arm and leg that was deformed, told I would never be able to read, write, or communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far in life as a first grader trying to go to school. Had to wear a dunce cap when I was a kid. Only made it through elementary school with the help of asking smart kids questions. So I would ask questions and they would elaborate and I would get enough to pass school. That worked till I was 12. I moved to a small socioeconomic area, small town, didn't have a bunch of smart kids, dropped out of school, became a street kid at 13. And pretty well, this is the 60s, so this was the free love days and party days and stuff, and Vietnam days. Hitchhiked to California when I was 14 and down into Mexico to go surfing, because that was something I loved doing. Made it to Hawaii when I was 15, surfing. Lived on the North Shore, first under a bridge, then on a park bench, then in a bathroom, and then an abandoned car, and finally a tent. Kept social climbing. Rode big waves. Then nearly died when I was 17. That led me to this experience of meeting a man who was doing a lecture on the North Shore. And that one night, one man named Paul Bragg inspired me to believe that I could overcome my learning problems and be intelligent someday, which is something I wasn't expecting to have happened that night. But that inspired me to eventually go back to California, hitchhike back to Texas, take a GED, high school equivalency test, try to go back to school, failed again, and then almost gave up on the goal of being intelligent and a teacher, which is what I wanted to do. And my mom found me crying in the living room. She said, "What's wrong, son? What happened?" I said, "I failed the test. I got a 27. I needed a 72 to pass." And she said, "Son, whether you become a teacher like you dream about and learn to read and everything, whether you go back to ride big waves or return to the streets, I just want to let you know your father and I are going to love you no matter what." And when she said that, my hand went into a fist and I made a determination. I said, "I'm going to master this thing called reading and studying. I'm going to master this thing called teaching. And I'm going to do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance, pay whatever price to give my service of learning and teaching." And I went into my room and I locked myself in a room with a dictionary and I started memorizing a dictionary. And my mom and I would test me on 30 words a day until my vocabulary was strong enough to get in and pass school. For the next 2 years, I put in about 20,000 words into my head. And I started to actually do well, to my surprise. And my teaching career started at 18. And November this year will be 50 years since it all started. And that led me to go on to school, get an advanced degree, become a doc, teach, first locally, then around the state, then around the nation. And now I've been able to speak I've spoken in 170 countries now. And I love it. And with the help of Zoom, I'm getting to do even more. But I made a goal to do that. I still haven't been to every country on the face of the earth, but I'm still working on it.
What a remarkable story of so much, adversity you've faced over those years and how you've overcome that to what you're doing today. It's truly remarkable. And you're certainly the right person to help the listeners in terms of how they can rewire their brain for a healthy mindset. And that's the title of today's discussion, is how to help the listeners do that. And in particularly in the current circumstances where we find ourselves going through unprecedented sort of levels of change, and particularly with COVID, with the reopening and entertainment being back on, travel being back on, health could drop away as a person's priority, because they're going to, as you say in the gratitude effect, fill those voids with a desire. So I'm really keen to have this discussion as to how a person can rewire their brain for a healthy mindset.
Well, every human being has a set of priorities that they live their life by, a set of values, things that are most to least important in their life. And everyone has a different highest priority. Some people have a high priority on learning, like mine was later on. Some people have a high value on business. Some have a high on wealth. Some have it on relationships. Some have it on social contribution. Some have health. And some have spiritual pursuits. And no one's right or wrong for whatever their highest values are. Their hierarchy of values are unique to them, and it dictates how they perceive, decide, and act. And every decision and action they take is based on what they believe at that moment will give them the greatest advantage or disadvantage. So if an individual doesn't perceive the primary action steps that have proven to help wealth and longevity, or health and longevity, they're probably going to bypass those and go to things that are what they think are more valuable at that moment. So if they can't see how those action steps that have proven the test of time to help well-being, wellness, and maximizing, performance and health, if they don't see how that's going to get them what they're looking for, they're not likely to get around to doing it. And they'll have to be reminded and extrinsically motivated to do. So one of the great questions is to first learn from yourself and from other experts, what are those action steps that are solid and demonstrated to be health conscious and healthy? And then ask, how specifically is doing this action helping me fulfill what is most important, what my life is already demonstrating without having to be extrinsically motivated? Because unless they make a link between the action steps that are really priority and what's really important, unless there's a link, the brain bypasses it because they're focusing on what they think is important. And when they make a link and answer that question, and I don't mean one time, I mean 30 times or 50 times, how specifically is doing this action that is known to be wellness and conscious helping me get my business? How is it going to help me attract a mate? How is it going to help me in my spiritual contribution? And if they answer that question, and they may need some help on that, but once they answer that question, the more they do, the more neural pathways of doing those actions get incorporated into the brain. And now you see more advantage and disadvantage doing that than what you were doing. And you start to make a habit out of that spontaneously. Because if you have to require extrinsic motivation to get you to do it all the time, you have to be around a trainer or a health coach or whatever, constantly pushing you. But if you make those links, the more you make the links and the more you get the habits and the more you get the rewards and the more you see how it's helping you get what you want, the more you incorporate it into your life, it becomes a pattern of, wise habits. So it's about asking, how specifically is doing these action steps that are proven the test of time on health and well-being, how specific is going to help me build my business? I had a young boy, he was probably just about 20. And he was sitting there not doing anything health-wise, and he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so what I did, because his parents were concerned about his health, I said, so let's take the top entrepreneurs out there that you admire. We made a list of them. I said, let's go online and let's find out what their health regime is. And once we found out that they were doing certain health regimes, he immediately put it in, because his mind now sees, if I want to be like this person, they do this. And so he immediately saw the links to his top people. So that's the beauty of Google. You can find stuff like that. But what I did is I helped him make a link that if I want to accomplish something, here's what it's going to take. And once he saw his mentors do that, he immediately go, oh, okay. Well, if they do that, it must be important, so I better do it. And that was all it took to get him started on that. But once you see those connections and those links, you're increasing the probability. With every answer you answer that question, you're increasing the probability of doing those behaviors that will enhance your performance. Anybody in business knows that if your energy levels are up, your vitality is up, you're eating wisely, you're doing some exercise, your performance is going to go up. And that's well established. But unless people see it and make the connections in their own, it doesn't become intrinsic. It has to be extrinsic motivation.
And I'm just thinking of this particular person that's been starved of not being able to travel the world, and they love travel. They really value travel. It's high on the value list. And now they can. The world's their oyster. They can get out and travel. But if they have associations of travel with eating unhealthy and drinking and doing everything to the excess, so with that particular person, you would then relate health and well-being back to a value that's important to them? Or how would you disassociate this, I guess, travel with doing excessive things such as drinking and eating bad food?
Well, I travel. I've done over 20 million miles.
Wow.
So
wow.
I've got, I think, George Clooney, I've doubled him over him and up in the air or whatever.
Wow.
I don't find that travel by itself is the initiator of drinking, because I don't drink. And I've traveled 20 million miles. And I find quality foods wherever I go. You know, I don't have a problem finding them. Rarely do I have a real glitch on finding them, some little rinky-dinky airport or something I may be in. But I usually find something that's quality food wherever I go. So if it's high enough on the values, when the why is big enough, the house take care of themselves. But I always say that if you're not filling your day with something deeply meaningful and filling up the blood supply into the executive center of the brain where you have self-governance and do wise actions and are more objective, your brain automatically goes down into the amygdala, and the amygdala is more likely to want to drink, overeat. It's the amygdala that does that. So usually that means that you are not having something deeply meaningful and inspiring to fill your day with while you're traveling. And if you're just doing that and you have no accountabilities that's meaningful, if I ask people, I've asked millions of people, what is the most fulfilling moments in your life? You can almost guarantee it's when you're doing something that is meaningful and that's fulfilling and it's serving another individual that's making them say thank you. When you do that, your blood goes into the executive center, which is a self-governing center, and calms down the amygdala, which is the addiction center, and the overeating and drinking center. And you don't end up doing those behaviors. So I would suggest, if you're going to travel, to do it in a way where something extremely meaningful is there that's too important not to be able to fully engage in. So you don't want to drink and overeat because you don't feel your best while you're engaging in it. And then what that'll do is it'll increase the probability of when they go there, they have a purpose. Because if you don't have a purpose, you seek pleasure all the time, immediate gratification. Have some purpose that's meaningful when you travel, that's deeply important to you, that you don't want to mess it up by overeating and drinking and not be present with it. That would be my suggestion. Because I always say that, money without meaning leads to debauchery. Money with meaning leads to philanthropy. And you feel more fulfilled when you're doing something that contributes than you do when you're getting drunk and overeating. You get immediate gratification, but then hours later, you don't feel so great. And as long as you separate in your mind pleasure from pain, your amygdala runs your life. But when you put this together and realize that while you're eating, that overeating, you're actually, the pain of that is that you're not feeling well in the stomach, you're slugged, you're not performing well, and you're sleeping. And when you realize that those are the pains and pleasures there, you're more likely to be governed and more likely to be back up. So it's so important to have a really important and meaningful objective while you go travel.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt that you certainly do. Having read the Gratitude Effect and the factors, the Value Factors book, I certainly got that well and truly. And my next question is in relation to the values factors. You talk about how it's important to find balance between sympathetic activity and parasympathetic activity. And as a health professional, I see a lot of sympathetic dominance within people. They're constantly in that sympathetic state, and you've talked about the amygdala, and that's it's always seeking, I guess, pleasure, and it's out of balance. And in your book, you talk a lot about finding this true balance and seeing the world as completely balanced. And so, I'd love you to share that. Well, also in the book, you say the cornerstone is gratitude, and love is the cornerstone to wellness. So I think I'd love you to share your views around this thing of wellness and how it's tied to gratitude and love, and how it's important to have balance in your life.
All right. We got some, I'm going to take a minute on this one because this is a good one. I just did a presentation yesterday for 4 hours on this. As I said, we have a set of values in our life that are priorities, a hierarchy of values. Whatever is highest on our value, our identity revolves around. Whatever's low in our values, we disown. So we own. So in my highest value is teaching. Second one is learning, researching. So my lowest value is probably cooking and driving. I haven't driven a car in 32 years. I haven't cooked since I was 24.
Wow.
Anything that's low on your values is wise to delegate. Because anytime you do things low on your values, you devalue yourself. Anytime you do the things that are highest in priority and highest in value, you value yourself. And so is the world. So I've delegated all lower priority things so I can stick to the things that inspire me. Because whatever is highest on your value, it spontaneously inspires you from within. Now, so that's one of the most significant things in wellness is living by priority, living by what's really meaningful. Because then the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the executive center where you're governing yourself, and when you're more objective and neutral and more balanced. Because if you don't and you do lower priority things, the unfulfillment and the blood glucose and oxygen going to the amygdala makes you immediately want to avoid challenge and seek ease and avoid pain and seek pleasure and go back into polarized, addictive, immediate gratifying behaviors, impulse. And that leads you into a bipolar swinging state instead of a balanced state. So you have illness instead of wellness. And if you live by high priority and activate the executive center is also called the gratitude center. And you're getting to do what you love because it's high in priority. It's meaningful. The mean, by Aristotle's term, was the mean between pairs of opposites of excess and deficiency. And that's what the amygdala is. It's in excess and deficiency. And the executive center is governed into a balanced mean state. So you extract meaning out of your experiences. Also, whenever you look up at somebody and exaggerate somebody, put them on a pedestal, you'll minimize yourself relative to them. And when you minimize yourself, you're not being yourself. You're being a persona, a mask, a facade of less than who you are. And if you look down on somebody and judge them and look down on them, put them in the pit, you'll exaggerate yourself and you go into pride. And again, a facade, a mask, and a persona. And the moment you exaggerate yourself, you're not being yourself. Every human being wants to be loved for who they are. But as long as they're looking down on somebody and being exaggerant, or looking up at somebody and minimizing, they're not being who they are. They can't be loved for who they are because they're not being who they are. But the second you have reflective awareness, and don't put people on pedestals or pits, but put them in your heart and love somebody with pure reflective awareness, which means you're not too proud or too humble to admit what you see in them inside you. You own what you see because it's a projection of your own evaluation. Once you own that, balance that, and are really you get to love you as you love them. You can't love another person without loving you, and vice versa. I've proven that in my Breakthrough Experience program for almost 4 decades. And what's interesting is the moment you do, and it's balanced, the executive center comes on, the gratitude center comes on. Gratitude is a perfectly balanced mind. When you have a perfect balanced mind and you're authentic, you're grateful because you get to be you. And nobody wants to have to put on a facade to be with people. So gratitude and love automatically, when they're balanced, they balance the autonomics. Because when you put people on a pedestal and inject their values, that's a parasympathetic side. When you put them in a pit, that's a fight or flight side, because you're looking down on them and resenting them versus infatuating them. When you infatuate them, you want to eat them with the parasympathetic. When you want to avoid them with the sympathetic when you're looking down on them. But when you look across at them, you have a nice balance and you have a reflective awareness. And that's the one that allows the autonomics to go into balance. Now, when the autonomics are perfectly balanced, the sympathetic and parasympathetic are perfectly balanced, the heart rate variability goes up. Your resilience and adaptability to life goes up. And you have eustress and resiliency and adaptability instead of distress and the inability to adapt to a changing environment. So your wellness quotient goes up, your love and appreciation goes up, your authenticity goes up, and every sign and symptom that the autonomics create in the body are feedback mechanisms to get you back to authenticity. It's almost like the body is creating symptoms in your life to try to let you know, but we don't know how to interpret them. We're so used to an allopathic approach where you take a pill for every ill when you don't feel well, that you just take some and you suppress the symptoms palliatively instead of curatively. But each of those symptoms are actually feedback mechanisms to guide us into homeostasis, back into balance, back to authenticity, back into our highest priority, where we can be objective and engage with an inspiration to fulfill something meaningful in life. So if you interpret your physiology and the symptoms wisely, they actually guide you back to authenticity so you can be loved for who you are.
And that's exactly what your parents said to you, and really was like a rocket behind you once your parents said that, they love you unconditionally for who you are. And it gave you the momentum and certainly the motivation, momentum, but and it just grew and grew from there. So incredible, your story and then how you.
I said I'm grateful for my mom at that moment, because I was in a distraught moment, curled up in a fetal position underneath her little Bible stand in the living room. And if she hadn't have said that, I don't know. I might have gone back to Hawaii and just stayed with surfing. And but that was a major turning point. It was like there was no turning back at that moment. No, there's no option now. We're going forward. We're making this happen. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to memorize 30 words a day when you have dyslexia, but I did it. We did it. I would not go to bed until I could spell the words, say the words properly, put them in a sentence, extract the meaning, and repeat that. And I would spend hours to get those 30 words. I'm not talking about just here and there. It was a determination, because I knew that if I could get those vocabularies up, that I could understand those words, I could begin to read, and I could begin to speak, and I could be able to, extract meaning and pass. So it was really important to me. And boy, did it accelerate from going from failing to the top of the class within a very short period of time. I mean, it was really quite interesting when I just made a determination. There is no turning back. Everybody else in school was interested in just kind of partying. They kind of had to go to school. I wanted to go to school. And so it was a different game for me. And then I learned that one of the fastest way to learn something is to teach it. So if I read something and I immediately have somebody to give it to and recite it back in my own words or whatever, I retain it. Retention of knowledge is based on the speed of input to output. So if you say something and it's a year later, you're not going to remember it. But if it's within minutes of reading it and sharing it, reading it and sharing it, reading it and sharing it. So I made it a daily ritual to develop a sharing mechanism, a teaching mechanism every single day on what I read. And I eventually, by the time I was in my early 20s, I would get up early in the morning, and I kept faster and faster reading. I got to where I was speed reading after a while. I got to the point where I would read 4 to 7 books in the morning before 2:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And then teach that day what I just read. And I just accelerated that until now I've gotten to read over 30,600 books. But I was told by my teacher I would never be able to read. Well, I've done pretty good on that now. and I've never been able to write. And I've written a lot of books, nearly 300. Yeah. And they said, I never travel very far, go very far in life. Well, 20 million miles, never amount to anything. Well, I live on the biggest yacht in the world, and I'm pretty well off. And what's interesting, all the things they said I would never do, never communicate effectively. Well, I've reached people all over the world in over billions. So I'm a firm believer that whatever they say you can't do may just be the thing you're destined to do.
So true. You talk about that hierarchy of voids becoming the hierarchy of values, and that journey you've had, really, those voids in your life became so important to you, the learning, the communication, the travel. So it's remarkable. My next question is along the lines of being loved for who you are, and accepting yourself for who you are, and loving yourself. Because what I see, and it really hurts me, is I see so many clients that don't accept who they are, and they don't accept their body, and they're trying to morph their body into something that's not possible. And they do cruel things to themselves. They starve themselves, they over-exercise, they, self-sabotage themselves in their minds. And so I'm really wanting to talk about the great work that you do and how you can help these people to better accept and love who they are.
Well, anytime you meet somebody and you compare yourself to them, and you think that they are more intelligent, or you think that they're more attractive, or you think that they're more socially connected, you're going to self-depreciate yourself compared to them. I'll give a story for you. I had the opportunity to work with she was voted the most beautiful woman in the world at one time by a number of magazines. And she came to one of my seminars, the Breakthrough Experiences, which is my signature program that I help people with these kind of things. And you look at her and you go, if you're a guy, you look at her and you go, whoa, this is something extraordinarily attractive. But she couldn't see it. Because what she was doing is she was comparing her hair to this one girl that had thicker hair, her breast to this one girl that had more prominent breast, her thighs to the woman that had this more slender thighs or something, her abs to somebody else. She was comparing her parts to all of the parts of them. Now, the lady with the hair, the rest of it didn't have such greatness, but the hair was standing out. But because she wasn't looking at the whole person, she was looking at her hair, she was now minimizing her hair. So she kept doing this with all these other supermodels on these catwalks and stuff. And then she realized that, she's got dysmorphia, body dysmorphia. She has a completely distorted view about it, because anytime you put somebody on a pedestal about their body, you're going to minimize your own. And anytime you put somebody in a pit with the body, you're going to exaggerate your own. I've seen some women or men exaggerate their bodies as much as diminish it. I've seen it the other way around too. And you look at them and go, they really think that's attractive. It's quite interesting. So you have a dysmorphia. The moment you look down, you exaggerate it. And when you look up, you minimize it. And whenever you minimize it, that occurs not just in the body. There's body dysmorphia, but there's also intellectual dysmorphia, if that's a term. It's not a morph means body form, but it's sort of like a dysmorphia. So if you exaggerate their intelligence, you're going to minimize yourself. I've seen people have the fear of public speaking because they're thinking there's somebody in the audience that's smarter than them, and so they're self-conscious and minimize themselves. So they have a fear of speaking. If you get and speak in front of a bunch of kindergarten kids, you speak fine because you're looking down on them and not up. So when you look down, you can speak out. When you look up, you listen, you don't speak. So people sometimes have dysmorphia in their intellect. Some people will do it and go, well, my God, this guy's got this massive company. I got this little thing with 2 people. And you'll minimize yourself there. So anytime you compare yourself to others, minimize yourself to them and exaggerate them, you're going to self-depreciate yourself and don't believe in yourself. You'll do what is called brain offloading. You'll give decisions to those people instead of make decisions for yourself, and try to envy them and imitate them instead of be you. And the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasy you'll inject from other people that you put on a pedestal. And in reality, if you get to meet these people, and I've met 4,000 to 5,000 celebrities in the world. And if you meet them, you find out that they don't have a better life. They got a different life. They got their own challenges and problems. It's not better. It's just different. But as long as you got them up on a pedestal, somebody, because of intellect or social impact or whatever. I mean, I had a lady the other day that said, I feel so insignificant. I've spent 3 years and I've got so many thousands of people on my social media. And this other girl's got, 10 million. And we went and investigated and found out that she bought them. She had buying them to keep the numbers to try to do it. The truth is she had less. And she was, I can't believe that I fell for that, man. Then she found out that, oh my God, this was a facade. And she was comparing herself to a facade and not loving herself. So a lot of people, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. And Einstein said, my contempt for authority is what made me one. And we're not here to fit in. We're here to stand out. And we can't stand out if we're trying to delude ourselves by trying to be all these other people. So go for whenever you find something you admire in somebody, go find out where it's already inside you. Nothing's missing in you. It's in another form that you're not honoring. I have knowledge and intelligence in human behavior, not IT. So if I see somebody that's brilliant in IT and I go, oh, I'm such a klutz in that, that's not the answer. The answer is, where do I have that same degree of intelligence in my highest value? Because their highest value is IT. My highest value is human behavior. And then I go, I don't need to envy them. I don't need to imitate them. I need to understand that they have a different set of values. And unless I'm wanting those values, I don't expect to have those results. My values are leading to my results, and honor who you are.
Amazing. I'm still taking it all in, Dr. John Demartini. I'd love to hear what you do to look after yourself. You have a surfing background, you travel the world, and I know you've taken nutrition seriously ever since you got poisoned with strychnine and cyanide. So you're really keen to understand your routine on how you look after yourself, given your busy schedule.
Well, I believe I eat relatively well. I just had some Greek yogurt that's made fresh here on the ship. I'm on my ship right now. You probably see the curtains moving back and forth because they're out in the ocean here.
Oh, wow.
I had some mixed berries, fresh berries, and I had some homemade granola that they make that's fantastic. And at lunch yesterday, I had some fish and vegetables, like 5 vegetables and some fish. And a couple grapes and some multigrain bread. And last night I had brown rice, a bunch of vegetables, and some ginger. It had some chicken in it, and some corn soup. So I eat pretty well, I think. I don't snack. I drink water all day long. I drink quite a bit of water. And I exercise. I don't do it every day, but I do it once a week really intensely, and sometimes another one mildly. And I do something I love every day. This is what I love doing is researching and teaching. I spend the day. I learned a long time ago, don't do low priority things. You devalue yourself and you put yourself in your amygdala and you unfulfill your life. So people say, well, that's easy for you. You've got some wealth or something like that. I said, well, no, when I started to prioritize my life and live by priority, that's when I became wealthy. And by the way, wealth and well-being and health all come from the same root. Weal, W-E-A-L. That's the root of those etymologically. So when you are living wisely, health-wise, and are in a wellness pursuit, your wealth usually goes with it. Because your vitality and your enthusiasm and your inspiration and your fair exchange is what enhances wealth production. But I've delegated lower priority things since I was 27. I read a book called The Time Trap. And from that moment on, once I read that, I realized I'm not doing lower priority things. I'm delegating that. And I released myself from anything other than what inspired me. I think that has a wellness quotient. I'm soon 68. And most people don't think I'm 68. And I there's some things that are not the way they used to be. There's no doubt about that. But I think for 68, I'm doing pretty good. And But I think that giving yourself permission to do what inspires you on a daily basis and do something that is so meaningful where your vocation and vacation are the same, where you tap dance to work, as Buffett says, and you do something that's meaningful in a sustainable, fair exchange manner with other people, so you're recompensated for it, or remunerated for it. And that way you get to do what you love, get paid for it, and use the finances to delegate and give job opportunities to other people to do the things that are uninspiring. And that way you can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service, and people can't wait to get your service, and it tends to open up the doorways. And I think when you're inspired and you have something meaningful, you don't want to live to eat. You want to eat to live. You want to eat to perform because you have something meaningful and fulfilling to help people with. And I think that's what's helped me. And I also feel that, I think that, life is pretty magnificent. I don't have a ingratitude towards life. Life is pretty amazing to me. And that's because I prioritize. And many people scatter their lives, multitask their lives, burden their lives by subordinating to so many outside people through comparison that they don't honor who they are, and they scatter themselves doing low priority things and devaluing and frustrated and feel like they're putting out fires, and they're distressed and they're in their amygdala, and all they want to do is escape, with a break, a vacation, and a retirement to get away from this drudgery that they call life. And that's because they haven't mastered life. One of the reasons I teach the Breakthrough Experience program is to teach people how to transcend that trap and get on with doing something and structure their life. It's not rocket science. It's not really that difficult. They just need to be reminded of how to do it and shown how to do it. And when they do, I've watched millions of lives transform. They transform in front of their eyes. And it doesn't take that long to make a change in their trajectory of their life.
And those transformations are shared in the books that I certainly read. Only 2 of your 300 or more books. But amazing stories in both the values factor and the gratitude effect. And I thoroughly recommend the listeners to get Dr. John Demartini's books. They're incredible. They're actually transformational. So I must say I had a breakthrough experience just reading the books. And Dr. John Demartini, how can listeners best connect with you? How would you like them to reach out to you or embrace your work? Or
Well, the easiest way to reach me is simply my website. If you type my name, Dr. Demartini, DEMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com, or just Dr. Demartini, you'll find me. I think I've got 13 million different links to it. But if you go and type that in and go to the website and start browsing this website, you can go to media and you can go and watch, podcasts, radio, television, thousands of articles, magazines and stuff. It's an educational website. Or you can go on, launch the YouTube, and there's just tons of YouTube videos and podcasts, and Dr. Demartini Show, which is a broadcast thing. You can go to the products and look at all the different products there that are for people that, that they want to be engaged in. Or you can go on, find out what our events are, what we're doing live and free and paid events and whatever we're doing around the world. They can get acquainted in there. They can spend the rest of their life on there. There's so many great videos, audios, webinars, and magazine articles. I mean, I've written for 1,530 magazines around the world. So there's lots of magazine articles to read. You can stay on that website and just learn all your life. Anything to do with maximizing your awareness and potential in life and living more extraordinary life. There's all there in that website. So that's all they have to do is just go there and start browsing and see where their heart leads them.
It's like a life skills university, so to speak. It's phenomenal in terms.
And many people who do that find their way to the Breakthrough Experience. I've done that program 1,147 times around the world, and it's the most extraordinary weekend that I get to. It's my attempt to do what that man did for me when I was 17 with other people. Because my life changed when I met this man that night, and. So I made a commitment when I met him. I want to do this for other people. So that's the Breakthrough Experience is where that's where their life changes.
Remarkable. That leads me on to just some fun, quick questions. Who inspires you?
Well, there's a thousands of great, all the great philosophers, the West and East, all the great Nobel Prize winners I've read all about, and I've gone them all through from Nobel all the way through. I've had many mentors in different fields, from Paul Bragg, who changed my life, to Jim Parker, to Lakeshwa Ram, who was a mystic that had 7 PhDs by the time he was 35. Wow. I've had a guy, Frank Coney, who is a financial feedback advisor for economics. I've had mentors. And on the ship here, I've got contacts with some of the most amazing people on the planet. So, I've had mentors. There's not one. And then people usually ask me, what's the key book that you would recommend people to read? And I tell people, go get Mortimer Adler's Syntopicon Volumes 1 and 2. It's a PhD on the mastery of life. It's a summary of the greatest ideas from the greatest minds over the last 2,700 years that's lived in the Western world, all summarized in 2 volumes. And it's a great education for anybody that wants a PhD on mastery of life.
Wow. That's fun. And in terms of your favorite food, what's that?
My favorite food?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, even though some people say that it's not wise to eat good breads, I love multi-grain breads of different sorts. I love fruit. I love fish. Those are the 3 things I probably love most. And I drink vegetable juice also every day.
And your favorite place, given that you've been to 170 odd places in the world, where's your happy place? Where are you most happiest?
I live on a ship that travels around the world. I'm in the Atlantic right now, off the coast of Portugal to Spain. And this is probably the most fulfilling place to be, is on my ship traveling around the world, because I go to bed in one place and I wake up in another country. We just sail to another country sometime through the night. And I love traveling. When I was 18 years old, I asked my mom, said, because Paul Bragg, the guy that inspired me, said, say to yourself, I told him I couldn't read and write. And he said, say to yourself every day that you're a genius and you apply your wisdom. And I've been saying that ever since, for 50 years almost. And I said to my mom, what's a genius? And she said, people like Albert Einstein and Da Vinci. So I said, well, get me everything you can get me on those 2 guys. When I started to read some Einstein with the dictionary, he said that I'm a citizen of the world. He says, I'm not a man of my local, family or community or city or state or even nation. I'm a citizen of the world. And I immediately got a tear in my eye, and a tear in the eye is usually a sign that you're a moment of authenticity. And I knew that. And the same for Epictetus and Socrates and some of the great thinkers through the ages. They all believed that they were a citizen of the world, or the citizen of the universe, you might say. So my motto has been that the universe is my playground, the world is my home, every country is a room in the house, and every city is a platform to share my heart and soul. And so traveling around the world and traveling from room to room in my big home on the planet is where I love being most. And so it doesn't matter. I could be anywhere. I've been to, a few thousand cities and islands and ports and stuff. So I don't know. I think being right here is where I'm at. Right here, right now, right here with you is probably the most fulfilling thing at this moment. So this is it.
Beautiful. Amazing. And in terms of your favorite healthy habit?
I think probably the wisest thing that I do is I drink water. I don't drink, sweet drinks. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink stimulants, teas. I don't drink alcohol. I just drink water and vegetable juices. So those are the only 2 liquids that go in. Sometimes a ginger tea if I'm having some Chinese food or Japanese food. But I think that's probably it, water. I'm a deep breather. I'm an abdominal breather, and I drink a lot of water.
Okay. And is the abdominal...
I don't fluctuate. My fluctuation has never been more than 2 pounds up or down. It's pretty stable because I eat with moderation, rhythm, and consistency is what I've done with my eating patterns.
Fantastic. And is the abdominal breathing your form of mindfulness, or is it your expression of gratitude?
My Demartini Method, which is a method I've developed on how to dissolve emotional baggage and how to be focused and priority, I think is the key one. But, there's an old proverb that when I taught yoga way back when. I taught breathing technology years ago. As the breath waters, so is the mind. As the mind waters, so is the breath. If you don't have governance over your breath, you don't have governance over your mind. And one thing that we have about the breath, the diaphragm is both involuntary and voluntary. So you have control over your breath. And when you do, you can change your autonomics. Inhalation is sympathetic, parasympathetic is exhalation. So if you balance into 1-to-1 ratio, your breathing, you bring your autonomics temporarily into balance. So yes, I am a deep breather and abdominal breather spontaneously. It's not because I'm making an effort of it. It's just now a habit. And that does have a vital difference, because I'm amazed at how many people have tight shoulders, loose abdomen syndromes because they breathe up in their clavicular and upper chest area instead of their abdomen. And so they got a flabby abdomen and a tight shoulder because they're lifting their whole chest by that. And they're using levator scapular muscles and upper trapezius muscles and the scalene muscles, and they're lifting with muscles that aren't designed to do that. And then they wonder why they got a stiff neck and stiff shoulders and loose abdomen. And learning how to properly breathe wisely breathe is a wise thing to do. It's not that difficult. And once you develop the habit of it, it becomes your thing. And your energy will go up. And when you do, you'll moderate your autonomics, which means you'll moderate ghrelin and leptin hormones, so you'll eat more moderately. So you can't do balanced breathing without also helping you balance and moderate some of the other behaviors that are wellness quotients.
Yeah, so true. Fantastic. And your concluding words to part with the listeners, what would you like them to, what would you like to share if we haven't covered anything in this discussion? Or
look at what everybody can look carefully inside yourself about what you're really spontaneously are inspired to do and committed to doing. And don't compare yourself to others. Compare your daily actions to what's truly most priority and meaningful to you. And stick to priorities. Learn to say thank you, but no thank you. I'm on a mission, and I have a high priority thing that I'm to do. And don't try to distract yourself, because everybody in the world around you is trying to impose on you, according to their values, what they think is important for you to do. And if you don't discern between what's truly meaningful to you, you'll probably dilute your potential and meaning and fulfillment. So give yourself permission to be you. Why be second at being somebody else when you can be first at being you? And give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and do something extraordinary, not ordinary, because the true you is extraordinary. The false you is diluted, and you'll fit in instead of stand out.
Love it. They're such amazing words, and you articulate them so well in terms of, it's a great conclusion to the episode. So I just really am truly grateful to have you on the Me&my Health Up podcast, and to have met you in not in person, but at least to have an interaction with you. It's been a truly humbling and honored experience for myself, and what you've shared with the listeners is incredibly remarkable. And I've learned so much in my journey just researching for this interview. So I truly really appreciative of the work that you're putting out to the world and what you're doing out there to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others, which is what I seek to do. And I really, you are someone that inspires me. There's no doubt about that. So thank you for coming on the show.
No, Anthony, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I was looking forward to it. I had a bit of a glitch getting on, but we got on, didn't we? And thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So, thank you for your lovely questions and for what you're doing, because people, sometimes even though people know things, being reminded of the wise things to do in life always enhances people's lives. So thank you.
Thank you. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. If you've got some insight today, please share it with the rest of the world. We really want to get the message out there. We really want to help others. And so please like and share it and distribute it because it's all about enhancing other people's wellness and well-being and getting the great work that Dr. Demartini is doing out there in terms of becoming our life university. So thank you, listeners, and thank you, Dr. John Demartini.
Thank you.